True, nervous, very dreadfully nervous I had been, and am, but why will you say that I am mad? The disease had sharpened my senses, not destroyed, not dulled them. Above all was the acute sense of taste, a divine gift, really. I could distinguish every flavor, every spice. The subtle hint of cinnamon in the apple pie, the faint whisper of saffron in the rice. It was all clear as day to me. And yet here I stand, accused of madness by my own beloved Martha, as if such culinary sensitivity were a symptom of insanity rather than a testament to my refined palate. Hearken, and observe how healthily, how calmly I can tell you the whole story. It was in our quaint, often too quiet home that my trials began. The walls, the very silverware, seemed to conspire in silence, plotting my downfall over a piece of cake. Yes, cake. A confection so rich, so sinfully delicious, it taunted the very fibers of my being. Each night, as I lay in the stillness of our bedroom, I could hear it calling me, its chocolatey whispers seeping through the cracks of the refrigerator door, winding their way up the staircase, slithering under my door to coil around my senses. The siren call was almost palpable, as if the air itself carried the rich, cocoa-scented promise of that decadent dessert. The house, you see, had always maintained a kind of hushed reverence, as if it were a library housing ancient secrets rather than a family home. But the silence now felt charged, electric with the hidden tension of my impending betrayal for a mere morsel. The tick-tock of the kitchen clock became a metronome to my obsession, each beat a reminder of the cake's imperious beckoning. This chocolate cake was no mere bakery indulgence. It was an artifact of temptation, ensconced within our refrigerator like a jewel within a vault. With each passing day, its unspoken power grew, and so too did my fixation. By day, I moved through my routines like a ghost haunting his own life, distracted, distant, my thoughts ever returning to that last piece of cake, left over from Sunday's dinner party, where it had sat on the china plate, almost regal in its solitude, crowned with a glossy chocolate ganache that glimmered under the chandelier's light. As Martha slept soundly beside me, her breaths gentle and unsuspecting, I lay wide-eyed, tormented by visions of the cake. I imagined its texture both airy and dense, like a cloud darkened with the promise of storm. I pondered the exact sweetness of its frosting, likely as dark and fathomless as a moonless night, rich with the deep, earthy tones of the finest cocoa. The fantasy alone was enough to drive a man to madness, or at least to midnight snacking. And thus, each night unfolded, a tableau of silent agony, my senses held captive by a dessert. Could you, dear listener, not also hear its call if your senses were as acutely tuned as mine? Would you not also find yourself standing accused of madness in the defense of such a culinary delight? Ah, the Sunday of destiny arrived with an unsuspecting calm that belied the culinary storm brewing within the confines of our humble abode. We dined, Martha and I, on roast chicken, her specialty, seasoned to perfection, its golden crust as tempting as a siren song. Alongside mashed potatoes, whipped with a zeal only Martha could muster, fluffy as clouds and just as heavenly. And then, the broccoli, poor, unloved broccoli, sat on the edges of our plates, untouched, uncherished, a mere green garnish to assuage our culinary guilt and maintain some facade of dietary virtue. But oh, lurking in the shadows of our kitchen, nestled within the cold, unyielding embrace of the refrigerator, lay the treasure, a slice of chocolate cake so lavishly opulent, so sinfully enticing, I'm convinced it could seduce an ascetic from his meditative trance. This was no ordinary cake. This was a cake of legend, crafted not from mere flour and sugar, but from the very essence of temptation itself. The cake had been the crowning jewel of Martha's dinner party the evening prior, where it sat regally upon its ceramic throne, each layer a testament to the dark, rich depths of cocoa from which it was born. The ganache, a glossy lake of chocolate so deep and inviting, reflected the hungry eyes of our guests as they beheld its majesty. Yet, as the evening waned and the guests departed, full and satisfied, one piece remained, a solitary slice, perhaps forgotten in the revelry, or left as a deliberate test of my will. As the night cloaked our home in its starlit shroud, the silence was profound, yet within me a tempest raged, a battle between decorum and desire. I knew the cake awaited just beyond the kitchen door, its siren call whispering through the keyhole, a lullaby of cocoa and sugar designed to lure even the strongest will to its doom. Even as we cleared the dishes, exchanging pleasantries about the meal and the mild weather, my mind was elsewhere, ensnared by the cake's chocolatey tendrils. Each glance towards the refrigerator was a flirtation with danger, each innocent sip of coffee a mere placeholder for the taste of that decadent dessert. Was it not Poe himself who penned the lines of a heart that burned with an unremitting passion, much like the one that now set my soul aflame for that final piece of cake? Indeed, my heart beat akin to the telltale heart beneath the floorboards, thumping with the urgency of my concealed desire, as I plotted the moment I might steal away with my prize under the cover of night. Would that I could quell the beating of my own heart, loud as it was with its culinary covetousness. You fancy me mad. Madmen know nothing. But you should have seen me. You should have seen how wisely I proceeded, with what caution, with what foresight, with what dissimulation I went about crafting my plan to claim that celestial slice. Each step was measured, each glance sideways, every breath a calculated move in the great chess game of dessert domination. Night after night, I watched, I waited. I feigned disinterest, a ruse so cunning, not even the keenest observer would discern my true intent. But the cake, the cunning cake, it knew. Each time I approached the refrigerator under the pretense of a simple thirst, for a glass of water perhaps, or the facade of a healthy choice, a trivial carrot stick, its frosting glistened mockingly in the dim light, as if aware of my presence, my profound greed. It was as though the cake itself chuckled softly, its sweet, chocolatey laugh echoing in the chilled air, taunting me with its unattainable allure. My nights became a torment, an endless loop of desire and denial. How often did I find myself standing before the fridge, door ajar, basking in the cold, luminescent glow that bathed the kitchen in ghostly light. There, in those quiet moments, the cake seemed to swell in size, its layers more decadent, its scent more intoxicating than during the light of day. I would reach out, fingers trembling with anticipation, only to snatch my hand back at the last moment, clutching a carrot with a ferocity that belied my disappointment. For that last slice belonged to my dear Martha, so I couldn't partake. Thus, this obsession began to weave itself into my very being. In the library where I worked, surrounded by the hushed whispers of patrons and the musty scent of books, I found myself doodling idly on scraps of paper, sketches of chocolate cakes, diagrams of slices, calculations of the optimal angle to cut a piece that maximized frosting intake without seeming greedy. My colleagues whispered, their sidelong glances laden with suspicion and unease. Had Henry lost his mind over a piece of cake? Surely no sane man would demonstrate such fervor over a dessert, they murmured. And yet, could they understand? Could they truly comprehend the depths of my confectionery conflict? I think not, for they had not tasted that cake, nor had they felt its rich, dark chocolate promises melt upon their tongue. Their minds were unburdened by the weight of such gastronomic temptation. Each night as I lay in bed, the image of the cake invaded my dreams. It danced around my sleep, a merry waltz of sugar and spice, its melody a haunting refrain that echoed the beating of my own heart. "Henry," it seemed to whisper. "Henry, claim me, devour me, for you and I are destined to be one." Oh, the torture, the exquisite agony of it all. How could I resist? How could I possibly maintain this facade of indifference when every fiber of my being cried out for just one taste, one glorious bite of that heavenly cake? Thus, my plan continued to unfurl, a scheme so intricate and so fraught with danger that even Poe himself might pity the poor soul ensnared by such a deliciously dark obsession, even scream himself, "Why hasn't she eaten it yet?" Upon the hour of my great attempt, the house lay silent, save for the distant hum of Martha's soap operas, her laughter mingling with the tragic despair of on-screen lovers. Perfect. The stage was set. My heart was steadfast. Not even the creaking of the floorboards underfoot, which sang like guilty conspirators beneath my weight, could deter me. The kitchen clock ticked a treacherous tempo, marking the seconds with unyielding precision as if aware of the heinous act I was about to commit. Yet, fortified by a resolve as dark and deep as the cake itself, I moved forward. With the stealth of a cat, or rather a cat burglar, for was I not about to purloin the very treasure of our domestic life? I approached the fridge. My hands trembled with anticipation, not from fear, for what had I to fear but the loss of the cake itself? My breath was controlled, measured, as though I were a seasoned actor about to deliver the performance of a lifetime, the curtain call of my culinary cravings. As I neared the sanctum of the refrigerator, a fortress of white and cold shielding the prize within, my mind raced with justifications for the deed I was about to commit. This was not merely a slice of cake. It was a symbol of everything tantalizing and forbidden. It belonged to Martha, my dear, sweet Martha, who had lovingly saved it for herself. How well I knew this. She had remarked, with that sly smile that danced upon her lips as easily as shadows play upon the wall. "I think I'll save this piece for tomorrow, dear. A treat for oneself, you know?" And I had nodded, feigning agreement, while inside, a storm of desire raged. That was days of torment ago. Ah, the duplicity, the deception. To covet what was hers by right of declaration. Was I not her devoted husband? Was I not sworn to uphold our marital harmony? Yet here I stood, a man driven to the brink by a piece of cake. The irony was as bitter as the darkest chocolate. Carefully, oh so carefully, I opened the refrigerator door. The light spilled out like the very beacon of truth, illuminating my path to perdition. There it lay, the cake, so innocently resting on its glass plate, the frosting gleaming under the artificial glow like a jewel in the crown of an empress. My heart, oh, my heart beat faster, louder, a drum roll of impending doom. I reached out, the cold air kissing my fingertips, whispering secrets of sweetness and sin. "Just one bite," the whisper urged, "just a taste to quell the longing." I paused, my hand hovering over the confection like a falcon poised to strike. Could I do it? Could I betray the trust of my loving wife for a moment of indulgent pleasure? At that moment, as if on cue, the sounds of Martha's laughter floated from the living room, a reminder of her presence, her existence intertwined with mine, a reminder of her claim upon the cake and upon my conscience. With a heart heavy with guilt and hands empty of cake, I shut the refrigerator door. The light extinguished, the moment passed. I retreated, a defeated man back into the shadows of our home, the echoes of my own heartbeat taunting me with each retreat. Thus ended my great attempt, not with the sweet taste of victory, but with the bitter flavor of moral rectitude. Could there be a more tragic irony for a man so governed by his senses? Indeed, I laugh at the absurdity of it all. And yet, I weep for the cake that was not to be mine. Retreating from the fridge with the moral high ground but an empty stomach, I could not shake the feeling of unease that clung to me like the faint aroma of chocolate that now seemed a mere ghost in the air. The house was too silent, too still, as if it were holding its breath, awaiting the drop of some great curtain on this farcical tragedy. The kitchen clock's ticking, once a comforting metronome in our domestic symphony, now sounded a knell for my forsaken dessert dreams. As I pondered the futility of my cravings and the strength of my resolve, a nagging thought tugged at the edges of my mind, whispering of unchecked possibilities and urging me back to the scene of my earlier defeat. Compelled by this mixture of hope and dread, I approached the refrigerator once more. Perhaps I had been hasty. Perhaps my eyes, clouded by desire and dimmed by disappointment, had deceived me. With a heart both hopeful and heavy, I reached for the handle, the cold metal a stark contrast to my fevered thoughts. Slowly, with the solemnity of a man walking towards his fate, I pulled open the door. But horror, agony, despair, how the heart of the scene unfolded before my trembling soul. As the door swung open and the cold light of the refrigerator cast a ghastly radiance upon what should have been my prize, what was revealed was a scene of utter desolation. An empty plate. Bare, save for a few chocolate crumbs scattered like the remnants of a lost civilization, a cruel testament to the cake's tragic fate. My cake, consumed. The sight struck me with a force greater than a blow. It was as if the very air had been sucked from my lungs, leaving me gasping, reeling from the brutal revelation. The plate, that wretched plate, lay there in its chilling barrenness, mocking me with its stark emptiness. The crumbs, oh, those treacherous crumbs. They seemed to laugh, a low, sinister chuckle at my calamity. They spoke of a feast enjoyed without me, enjoyed by another. And in that moment, a wild laughter erupted from the depths of my being, a laughter mingled with sobs. It was the sound of a man undone, a man who had danced too close to the sun of his desires, only to plummet back to the cold, hard ground of reality. I staggered backwards, my hand clutching the refrigerator door as if it were the only friend I had left in this cruel, dessert-deprived world. My thoughts spun, a whirlwind of chaos and confusion. Who? How? The questions pounded in my skull like the beating of a drum, each throb a reminder of my loss. Was it Martha? My own sweet wife, co-conspirator in life's journey, yet now, perhaps, the architect of my dessert downfall? Or could it have been some other shadowy figure, a dessert thief flitting through the darkened corridors of our home, pilfering pastries with the skill of a seasoned cat burglar? No, my heart knew. None but Martha could wield such power over the confectionery world within these walls. The crumbs formed a trail, a path of chocolate breadcrumbs that might lead a lesser man to madness. I considered following this breadcrumb trail, tracking it like a detective of old, each crumb a clue to the perpetrator's identity. Yet what more did I need to know? The absence of the cake was evidence enough. The crime had been committed, the sweet heist completed without a hitch, save for the silent scream of my broken, cakeless heart. With a heavy sigh, I closed the refrigerator, the click of the door sounding like the closing of a casket. The light within snuffed out, just as my hopes had been. I turned, my feet heavy as I faced the inevitable, a confrontation born not of dark alleys or shadowed corners, but of the intimate battleground of a shared, sweets-bereft household. Oh, woe was the man who loved cake as I did. Woe was the husband whose trust in the sanctity of dessert had been so ruthlessly shattered. For in that moment, as I stood alone in the dim kitchen light, I knew true despair. The despair of a lover scorned, not by the heart of his beloved, but by her stomach. With a heart heavy and eyes aflame, the tempest of my emotions swirling like a maelstrom, I turned upon Martha. The parlor, her usual sanctuary for evening melodramas on the television, now became the stage for a far more personal drama. She sat, innocently engrossed in the travails of soap opera lovers, the glow of the screen casting flickering shadows across her face. Unaware of the turmoil she had wrought upon my soul, she smiled at the fictional heartaches, a cruel mirror to my real agony. "Villain!" I cried, my voice slicing through the humdrum of televised dialogue, startling her from her reverie. "Dissemble no more. I admit the deed. Tear up the planks. Here! It is the beating of your guilty heart." The words, though borrowed from a tale of darker horror, echoed aptly through our quaint living room. Yet as I stood there, accusing her with a quivering finger, it was not her heart but my own that betrayed the cadence of guilt, a confessional tattoo pounding against my ribs, each beat a morose drum of defeat. Martha, ever the picture of serenity, paused her show, the remote held loosely in one hand. She turned to face me, her eyebrows arching in bemusement rather than fear. "My dear Henry," she began, her voice a soothing balm that somehow only inflamed my ire. "What has gotten into you this evening? Are we playing at Poe now, or is there some grievance you wish to air in less theatrical tones?" Her calm only served to stir the whirlwind of my frustrations. "The cake, Martha. The chocolate cake that was to be your treat, your solitary indulgence. It has vanished before its appointed hour. And here I find you, contented and untroubled, while I have been tormented by its siren call, wrestling with desires and morals, only to discover betrayal at my own hearth." A smile, wry and knowing, tugged at the corners of her lips. "Oh, Henry, my love, is that what this is about? The last slice of cake?" She chuckled softly, shaking her head as if at a child's nighttime fears. "Yes, I ate it this afternoon. It was, as you say, meant for my enjoyment, and enjoy it I did. But tell me, darling, were you perhaps hoping I had saved it for you? Or even better, that you might steal a bite, unbeknownst to me?" Her words, lightly delivered, struck me with the force of revelation. Yes, I had wished it. Wished to partake in the forbidden dessert, perhaps even to share it, a covert communion in the late hours of our domestic tranquility. And yet, here I was, exposed in my folly, my base desires laid bare. With a sigh, my shoulders slumped as the fury ebbed from my form, leaving behind only a sheepish embarrassment. "Martha, She rose, her movements graceful, and approached me. Placing a tender hand upon my cheek, she whispered, "Henry, if it is cake your heart desires, why don't we bake another together? A cake so splendid it shall make us forget all about the one that was lost. What say you?" Her suggestion hung between us, a lifeline thrown across the turbulent seas of my confectionery madness. "It was not just any cake, Martha," I exclaimed, the echo of my voice filling the still air of our living room. "It was the embodiment of temptation, a culinary siren calling to me. Yet you, my own wife, devoured it without a second thought for my torment." "All right. You want to continue this, or make the damn cake?" she exclaimed. "Could it be? A new cake? A fresh start?" The possibility sparked a light in the gloom of my despair. Yes, that would be the solution. A joint venture into the realm of baking where chocolate was not a wedge between us but a bridge. And so we laughed then, Martha and I, our laughter echoing through the halls of our quiet home, shattering the silence I had so cherished. Not cupcakes, but the promise of a new cake. Chocolate, undoubtedly, and perhaps with layers as deep and dark as the night itself, became our peace offering, a token of truce in our delicious war. Together we gathered the ingredients, each egg and cup of flour a step toward culinary redemption. As we mixed the batter, the rich aroma of cocoa filling the air, I found the shadows of my earlier madness receding. Here, in the warm glow of our kitchen, with flour dusting our faces like winter's first snow, the absurdity of my obsession became clear. Martha, with a spoonful of batter poised for tasting, caught my eye and winked. "Who knew that chocolate could both ignite a war and forge a peace?" she mused, her voice rich with warmth. Indeed, who knew? As we poured the batter into the pan, smoothing the surface with joint precision, I realized that this act of creation was a far sweeter endeavor than any solitary consumption could ever be. The oven's heat was not just transforming our cake, it was reaffirming our bond, baking it to a perfect consistency of love and forgiveness. When the timer dinged, we stood together, a united front ready to face whatever confection came our way. As the cake rose, so too did my spirits, lifted by the simple joy of sharing this task with Martha. Oh, you who call me mad, would a madman understand the art of confectionery forgiveness so well? Would he relish the laughter shared over a freshly baked cake, its scent a benediction banishing the ghosts of past grievances? I think not. And as we sat down to enjoy the fruits of our labor, the cake before us not just a dessert, but a symbol of renewed affection. I knew that this, here, with Martha, this was where true sanity lay. In the sweet, forgiving layers of cake, and the sweeter still company of my wife. As the last crumbs of our shared creation disappeared, a sense of peace settled over our household, a tranquility as deep and satisfying as the cake had been. Our laughter had echoed off the walls, a sound so foreign yet so desperately needed in the quietude that often enveloped our home. We had triumphed together in the kitchen, our battle with batter yielding not just a cake, but a stronger bond, a sweeter understanding. Yet, as is the way of all earthly delights, the cake was finite. The evening waned, and with it, the last slice, a solitary piece as decadent and tempting as the one that had started this whole confectionery saga, sat perched on a plate in the refrigerator, destined for Martha's lunch at school the next day. "This slice is for tomorrow to share with little Emma, who's been so sweet lately," she declared, placing a gentle kiss on my cheek, as if to seal the fate of the cake with a promise of benevolence. Ah, but fate has a peculiar penchant for irony, for no sooner had Martha spoken than the old, familiar stirrings began to whirl within me. The house returned to its customary silence, a quiet so profound it seemed almost an entity in itself, watching, waiting, whispering of chocolate and challenge. And there I was, left alone with the knowledge of that last slice, its existence a test of my resolve, its presence in our fridge a beacon of temptation, calling to me as surely as the moon pulls the tides. In the darkness of our bedroom, Martha's breathing deep and even beside me, the thought of that slice twisted and turned in my mind. Would it be so terrible, I pondered, to partake of just a small taste? A mere morsel to appease this gnawing need? After all, hadn't we made the cake together? Did that not bestow upon me some small right, some tiny claim to its chocolatey bounty? The clock ticked on, each talk a hammer blow to my weakening will. My heart, oh treacherous heart, thrummed a rhythm of rationalizations. The night stretched before me, an expanse of shadow punctuated only by the soft glow of the refrigerator light in my imagination, a lighthouse guiding me to the rocky shores of temptation. Rising from our bed with the stealth of a thief, or rather, a husband with a penchant for nocturnal nibbling, I crept toward the kitchen. The floorboards, complicit in my conspiracy, remained silent beneath my careful steps. The refrigerator door opened with a soft sigh, and there, bathed in the pale light, sat the slice, so innocently unaware of the drama it incited. "Just a taste," I whispered to the shadows, my voice a blend of desire and defeat. Just a small taste, for surely Emma would not miss a mere bite. And so it begins again, dear reader, the cycle of desire and deception, a deliciously doomed déjà vu. For who am I, Henry Pennington, but a man endlessly ensnared by the siren song of chocolate cake? Oh, you who might still call me mad, consider this. In the theater of the absurd that is life, is there any act more madly human than to be tempted, time and again, by a slice of cake? Ah, but listen, dear reader. If this tale did stir within you a tremor, if it did set your pulse to quicken and your breath to catch in the solemn hush of the night, then mark me well. Do not let your silence creep like a specter into the void. Nay, speak. Let your voice be heard in the murky depths below. Leave your mark in the abyss of the comments, where echoes of those who came before still linger. And should your wretched soul crave more darkness, more whispered horrors yet untold, then grasp the infernal chains of fate and bind yourself to this accursed place. Like, subscribe, and tether your very will to the promise of tales yet unborn. But heed this warning. Such stories do not spring forth of their own accord. No, they demand sacrifice, devotion, the ceaseless toil of trembling hands. So do what must be done. Do it. And perhaps, just perhaps, the next tale shall be whispered to you in the dead of night.